Bonjour mes amis, bienvenue à .NET API Review. We have almost a screen of backlog. Apparently it's the time that people are thinking about vNext again, aside from all these ones at the top that are thinking about V this week. So, see how far we get. First up, yeah, I am zoomed. What is this? .NET Extensions 689 or 5, Data Ingestion Pipelines. Mr. Sitnik, you're up.
So maybe I'm going to start with a little reminder. So last time we have discussed document reader and a document processor. They are all part of an ingestion pipeline, and we want to ingest things into a vector store to enable our customers to perform RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So basically allowing LLM to access our database with our knowledge to get more context, to access data we didn't want to provide, for example, for the training. And we have discussed how document is represented, how reader is designed, an ingestion document processor, and we have discussed the name of the first built-in and provided enricher, which is image alternative text enricher. Now I would like to discuss the chunks. So the most magical part is generating the embeddings, but we cannot generate embeddings for just of a string or a tag or image of any size. They need, in order for them to be meaningful, they need to respect some token counts and basically be of a narrow size, and ideally also be split. The text should be split in a way it has semantic boundaries. So we represent that with an ingestion chunk and document chunker. So document chunker is something that splits a document into multiple ingestion chunks. As of today, most of the industry uses string for chunking. So it just chunks into strings. However, in order to make it more future-proof, I have decided to make it generic, similarly to what we have in Microsoft Extensions AI for iEmbedding Generator, where the T in 99% is string as of today, but it could be something else in the future. So a chunk consists of a content, the document, the original document, and those two are mandatory. And then comes optional token count, context, metadata. And based on our recent review where document elements were also exposing metadata, and we decided to add a property called has metadata, I have added here it here as well.
So, with the token
yes.
count, sorry, with the token count property, is that an estimate? Is that a limit? Is that an actual number?
This is the actual number. So how many tokens it took to represent a given chunk?
Okay.
But this is a very good question because it leads us to the configuration, to the chunker options, which is an option back. So as I said previously, we need to respect some sizes, and for now, all of the chunkers that we provide, they support it. So we have max tokens per chunk, which is the number that says what's the maximum number of tokens allowed in each chunk, and also the overlap tokens. So the number of overlapping tokens between consecutive chunks. When it comes to overlapping, you can think of it like let's say we have a paragraph that describes a table, and then we have a gigantic table. So this paragraph the table should be split, maybe into multiple pieces, but the paragraph that provides the meaning for it should be repeated in every chunk. So we have default values here. I'm not a data scientist, but I have decided to just go with the default values recommended by some Azure documentation, provided by some scientists. Moreover, the chunker option bug is not sealed because I expect that some chunkers may expose some additional options, and I expect them to just derive from this type
Right.
instead of.
And
Yep.
I see that process async doesn't take the chunker option, so your expected model is each implementation chunking type takes this as a constructor parameter.
Exactly. And if you scroll down a bit, we are going to see the first implementation of semantic chunker, semantic similarity chunker. So to tell the long story short, it takes the entire document. For each element, it generates the embedding. Then it performs semantic similarity math. It sorts them, and based on provided threshold, it chooses the right percentile, and this is how it estimates what's the difference, what's the similarity difference needs to be in order for the two different elements to be in different chunks. So in order to create a semantic chunker, we need to provide embedding generator, a tokenizer, and optional options that define the max tokens and overlap tokens. The two other chunkers that we provide are header chunkers, the header chunker and section chunker. So header chunker, it's plain simple. It just uses the document structure to chunk it. So let's say we have the main header of level 1 and then two subsections, let's say subsection B and subsection C. It's going to chunk the document into a way that everything that belongs to the first subsection is going to go to the first chunk. If the limit is met, it will be multiple chunks, and then everything that goes to the second subsection will go to the next chunks. Section chunker. Here a reminder: a document is represented as multiple sections. They can contain subsections. An example of a section, for example, in case of PowerPoint presentation, is just a page or a slide. And the section chunker just splits them based on the sections, and basically it treats every section in a document as a separate entity. It's a very, very simple chunking strategy, but it can be useful, for example, for PowerPoint presentations where every slide is its own chunk. On top of that, we have a chunk processor, which takes async. Yes?
So since sections can have subsections, the section chunker, how does it handle subsections, and do you need an option for that?
As of now, it treats every subsection as a separate chunk, but it's a very good question. I was wondering if we should expose this as a configuration option up front to let the users decide should it treat the subsections as part of the larger chunk or treat them as separate entities.
Because this is highlighting an interesting design pattern choice here. So by thinking that your model is that you have inherited chunker options as a constructor parameter, if you ship section chunker looking like this and then decide next version that you want a boolean to or an int to control how subsections and subsections etc work, presumably now you have to derive chunker options for section chunker options, and so now you have two constructors, one that takes the base type and one that takes the derived type. But so it makes me wonder, do each of these really just want to preemptively derive chunker options and say, I only take my chunker options, not a base chunker options? No could be the right answer. It's just making me wonder, how is this going to evolve for the ones that you don't already have a derived type? Because the first one No, you didn't have customized options yet. Okay. Well, actually, interestingly, you did. You took the threshold
Yeah.
percentile as just an extra parameter instead of an extra option.
Yes.
So is extra parameters the like by not sealing this, you said you expect derived types, but then at your very first type you didn't derive it.
Yes, I actually haven't authored this particular chunker, but you're right. We should have a dedicated option back here. But speaking of the initial question, yeah, what we have right now would allow for, adding a dedicated option back. If it comes with a defaults, then it's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
that one way is necessarily better than the other, but you presented it as your expected style and haven't hit it yet. So
yeah, I kind of wanted maybe the custom chunkers derived, like provided outside of the library, to kind of follow this pattern to respect the limits.
uh, which pattern? The just extra constructor
Like
parameters or the deriving the type?
respecting max token per chunk and overlap tokens. And my only concern was that it's a pity that in the option back I can only put optional things, because I would also love to put the tokenizer there, because each of them also has to come with a tokenizer.
Why can't you put the tokenizer in the options?
I assumed that the option back can contain only optional things, and we don't have a default tokenizer.
I mean, just as soon as you have a non-optional value, you just don't make it optional in the constructor.
Ah, I see. Okay, so this would be much nicer. Yeah.
While we're on this particular part of the screen, do we want to use the default value of 95 and then further down on max word count and summary enricher 100? We API review generally says be careful about using non using specific values in defaults, because they can't be changed later without breaking existing code. So for threshold percentile, either two APIs or potentially using NaN, which is in illegal value, would allow you to adjust the threshold percentile over time. And similarly for max word count, using something like -1 to indicate a sentinel of not specified would allow you to change it over time without worrying about impacting existing and already compiled code.
Yeah, and assuming 0 doesn't make sense, you could also do 0.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. The literal 95 here, if you change it in a future version, existing compiled things would still be passing 95, even if they had no opinion. New compiled things would get the new number. So if you want it to actually be a runtime dependent default, then it needs to not be a literal in the default.
I wasn't aware of that, but I like your suggestion, because it will make my life in the future easier.
Yeah, the way that this piece of syntax works is if a caller doesn't specify the parameter, the compiler extracts this value and puts comma that value. So the value moves to the caller, not to the callee. So it's a compile time value, not a runtime value. That's why they have to be literals.
Yeah. There was also a case further above where one of the classes had, this one, the ingestion chunk. It's using dictionary metadata, and framework design guidelines is do not return dictionary list, etc. Return iDictionary.
No, it's
list
the opposite.
No, FDG says do not use hash table or dictionary in public APIs. These types are data structures designed to be used in internal implementation. Public APIs should use iDictionary or a custom type implementing one or both interfaces.
Weird. Because the other guideline is, since this is get only, it's return the most concrete type you can guarantee. And if they're guaranteeing it's always dictionary, it should return dictionary.
Hmm.
As an input parameter, you shouldn't ideally take dictionary because you should let some other dictionary come in. But as a return value, if it's really dictionary, you should be honest.
I will say there have been times in the past with like options where, and things like that, where we have made things a dictionary initially, and then later it's like, oh, we don't want to allocate as frequently in some scenario, and therefore it's not, like, maybe you're just checking length or something. I don't know. It might be hard to make work in this situation, but
Yeah, to avoid those allocations, we introduced the has metadata property.
right. That's fair. And like, even if you did have iDictionary, I think you'd still need has metadata, just because people could try mutating the thing after checking the length to 0. But still, it is more flexible to have the interface. I'm okay either way.
Yeah, and it sounds like we just have two somewhat conflicting rules here, or one of the rules just isn't specific enough. So whatever Jeremy says it should have been is probably the way we should defer to it.
I assume you mean as the most recent author of the book, as opposed to as the person running the meeting.
Do we expect the consumer of ingest chunk to mutate the dictionary, the metadata dictionary?
So later you will see that the chunk processor, it takes async enumerable of chunks and it returns them. It also returns async enumerable. And for content, so let's say you want to remove PII. We expect the users to return a new chunk, but if they just want to extend existing chunk with, let's say, a summary or sentiment, we expect to modify the metadata and just extend it with new key values.
Yeah, okay.
In general, I know it's a bit conflicting because in a sense it's immutable, but on the other hand, we expose mutable dictionary. So I just wanted to make the life of our users simple, like to kind of, and I didn't want to expose content as mutable because I was afraid that somebody could mutate content but forget to, for example, update the token count. So yeah, if you want to change the content, you have to create a new one. If you just want to add some metadata, then just feel free to mutate the dictionary. That's the approach here.
Okay, the other question here is why the token count is nullable?
Because the token count may not always be available. For example, as far as I know, if we would use image.
Yeah, image have some other notion of token counts there.
Yeah, and one example that I have run into was when I wanted to implement some PII removal as a processor. At this point, I didn't have the access to the tokenizer, and I just wanted to remove certain parts of the text. So I had the ability to like remove something, but I didn't have the ability to recount the tokens.
So what is the difference between null and zero token count?
So null is we don't know how many, and zero is we know it's zero.
Yeah, my question is how this will make difference for anybody consuming that.
Let me take a look at the usages of the. We know it's zero.
Yeah, I'm just asking because like we have
Yeah.
the chunk options, which is you specify the maximum token per chunk. And
Yeah. So I just checked the usages and I don't remember on from the top of my
Okay.
head because I'm working with a student, Christoph, on this project, and he owns the chunking part. And from what I can see, we just use it for test and for storage. Yeah, I think it was added in case it's needed in the future, the token count. And initially it was mandatory, but then when we started adding processors that could modify, could create a new one with a different content, we decided to make it nullable. But to be honest, I'm a bit surprised that it's being used only in the tests. So I think we should either make it mandatory or remove it. Because for testing purposes, we can just put it into metadata and check there.
Okay.
So which one are you going with?
Can we decide to make it mandatory? And if I change my mind later, I can just remove it? Because I'm just going to verify, what other libraries expose, because as I said, I haven't designed this particular type. I'm just going to make a market research and find out whether it's valuable to provide it. Because, yeah, in general, all of the chunks returned by the chunker should respect the limit. So the count shouldn't really matter a lot, beside of just for the purpose of testing to verify that it actually does.
Okay. I wrote a note that says we wanted to change it from nullable to mandatory or remove it, and either's fine, but because I have to hit submit with something on the screen, I'm going to make it mandatory. But feel free to remove it.
Thank you.
Okay, so the easy one to answer will be threshold percentile. Do we want nan? Is nan a literal? Tanner?
It should be. It's a const because it's represented as 0 divided by 0.
Okay, so float.nan is a const.
Yeah, that should be fine here.
Yeah, because it's I can't think of how to type it otherwise. So it may be a reference to const instead of a easy literal. But unless you want to tell me that capital N lowercase a capital N F is a const, which it could be.
No, it's just float dot
Yeah.
capital N lower, and that's in C# 0 divided by 0, positive infinities +1 divided by 0, and negative infinities -1 divided by 0.
Fair enough. Yeah, so do we want to go nan to say caller had no option? Do we want to go nullable to say caller had no option? Do we want to say 0? What are we thinking?
Maybe nullable will be make sense more.
Yeah, because the nullable implementation would just be you set your field to threshold percentile dot get value or default 95.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's magic.
okay, so I'll change that to nullable. Okay.
And then we also need to extend chunker options with a mandatory tokenizer and remove it from each constructor. and then make the options not a mandatory argument.
Okay. How do we represent that with nullability? Do we make a constructor that says it's a required parameter? I guess this is where where the options bag question comes in, because it's the optional versus default parameters. Sorry, optional versus mandatory parameters with an option bag.
I would be in favor of making only one public constructor that accepts a mandatory tokenizer.
Sounds good. And if we gain other mandatory things in the future, then we'll deal with that. Okay, that's down here. Okay. But I guess so back to semantic similarity chunker. Are we going with chunker options and a threshold percentile, or are we making a derived type?
I would go with a derived type, but I'm open to others' feedback, because what's good about this is that we like the disadvantage is that we require a new type for, let's say, I want to have one more customizable thing in my class.
I mean, a reasonable position would be you make a derived type when you're a non-sealed chunker. But since it's sealed, you can go with an option or with a constructor parameter.
Okay.
I mean, like
So
that's a reasonable position of saying it's unsealed so that things can do a derived type, and that what you're planning on doing in types that you own is sealed types just gain constructor parameters, and non-sealed types gain customized options so that they don't over time have like 11 different constructors. The answer is just we want a story, and I think that is one. Okay. So section chunker asked about subsections, and I think your answer is we can add a boolean in the future.
Yes.
Or an int, or whatever we decide it needs to be. Okay. So then are we on
The chunk processor?
Chunk processor? Okay.
Yes. So once the document has been chunked, we can provide an optional chunk processor. And here we have some examples. One that adds a summary, another that adds sentiment, another that does some simple classification, and another one that does keyword enrichment. So currently all of them are just enrichers, but I didn't want to limit the name of the abstract class to enricher, because in theory it could be, for example, a processor that filters out some of the chunks.
Oh, pardon. I actually I remembered I had a question previously. The ingestion chunk. So if you take a gigabyte document that's text,
Yes.
and you're you're chunking it down into paragraphs. You said the expected is ingestion chunk of string, so you're going to turn that gigabyte of contiguous document into a gigabyte of sparse document,
Yes.
as opposed to, read-only memory or some other interpretation.
Yeah, our initial design assumed that we would have a read-only memory, or basically something that would be like a range within the original text. But when we were implementing the storage part, we realized that we need to materialize them anyway. Moreover, plenty of chunks, they're just some concatenated string. A good example is a chunk that contains a large table. So let's say we have a paragraph that describes the table, and the first half of the table and the second chunk contains the same paragraph and the second half of the table. So in that regard, we just, internally we use a string builder to just append all of that. And if we were not about to do it, then the content would need to be something like I read only list of read only memory of char.
Or like
Because
read-only sequence.
it can be multiple things. It can be that produce the content.
Okay, fair enough. I just remembered I had that question floating in the back of my head. All right, back to your enrichers.
Yeah, so we have the chunk processor, which is an abstract class, and 4 default enrichers, because we expect that our customers will be willing to use summary a lot, maybe sentiment and classification and keyword enrichment. They're all basically just wrappers on LLM. So we use iChat client abstraction. They do allow for some configuration. Like, for example, for summary, we allow the customers to specify the max word count. For sentiment, the confidence threshold. For classification, we expect the users to provide a closed set of predefined classes. They may also provide a fallback. The reason we expect a closed set of predefined classes is that we want them to get repeatable results, because we could also ask LLM to just classify it without any predefined classes, but there is no guarantee that it would always return the same response. And similarly to the keyword enrichment, we expect the users to provide predefined keywords and max number of keywords and confidence threshold. However, I have verified that plenty of products offer automatic keyword extraction, and if they want to get that, they need to say that predefined keywords is null.
Okay. So we'll return to Tanner's comment regarding the defaults. So do all of max word count, confidence threshold, I guess, and then max keywords and confidence threshold. I'll just switch to nullable.
Yes, that would make a lot of sense.
So for classification enricher, you default fallback class to unknown. My feelings on that are, if you're going to do that and somebody's supposed to see that it ended up being the unknown class, you should expose that as a const. At which point it would be valid to have as the default value, but that basically it feels like you would want classification enricher dot default fallback class or something, so that somebody can ask, did this get classified as the default, or did it get classified as something else? That's just a feeling I have. I could be wrong.
I don't have a strong opinion on this. I'm actually looking very much forward to getting customer feedback, and we expect to ship it as preview. Yeah.
Should fallback class be nullable and use null instead of this string literal unknown? Then it's both cheaper to check and more clear.
I guess, yeah. Would it be a problem if it ended up being null?
No.
Okay, so just change it to a null default, and now you don't need to expose the const.
For all of the constructors there that are taking the string array predefined classes, are you creating a copy of that, or are you taking it literally and then someone could change it after the fact?
I'm creating a copy, and to be exact, I'm creating an instance of some Microsoft Extensions AI class that is used for message. Let me take
Okay.
a look.
Should we have a span overload so people aren't forced to allocate for small input collections, just have it copied a second time? Because I imagine most of these cases are going to be like 1 or 2 inputs, not a ton, and so people would presumably want to pass it down using collection expressions or similar and avoid the allocation and then the second allocation to copy into the internal field.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with accepting a span.
Under
And
that rule, would you say that 0 means do automatic keywording?
Yeah, in such case, an empty span would mean that, yes.
Right, because I mean, right now, I guess it didn't occur to me to ask. You have the null array and then the empty array, and you said null meant automatic, but empty would mean match nothing. So presumably,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah,
so
we
just
would have only 2 valid inputs, right? Like either empty or with something.
all right. And do we think we want to go span only or overload it? Span only means you can't be called from PowerShell. I guess you're sealed, you don't care. So probably just overload it and be nice.
Okay.
Is that true for both keyword enricher and classification enricher?
Yes.
Okay. Clearly working crypto. Read only span is immediately followed by the word byte. Even though it's the wrong answer. All right. And I assume the metadata key.
It's just the name of the key that it adds to the metadata dictionary.
Yeah. Why is that a static get instead of a const?
Because if it's a const, then if people file it.
So,
This const is
like,
copied, right?
yeah, are you reserving the right to change it in the future?
Yeah, since it's a preview, yes, I do. But in the long term, most likely not. But yeah, yeah.
Because there'd be very few cases where it matters, but it just occurred to me that you did write that not as a const. So, but really, I'm just asking: did we use metadata key as a static or a const elsewhere previously, and we're copying a pattern, or do we need to think about this?
So I don't know if a similar pattern exists somewhere else.
Stefan, it feels like this would come up in a lot of the ASP pipelining and maybe HTTP chunking. Does it sound familiar to you?
Sorry, I was multitasking. What's the question?
Do you know of prior art of having a static property or const just called metadata key on things that just shove data into dictionaries?
Key is, yeah. I mean, so
Like-
we do prefer statics to const for lookup sometimes, because you can do reference equality, if that's what you're getting at.
I mean, that's one aspect of it. So it's really just, this feels like we're copying a pattern, and if we are, then I would just want to know we're copying it faithfully, and if we're not, then I want to know that we're deviating intentionally.
We definitely done this, and I think we usually use static strings more than const for this. I know we switched our header keys to be static strings for that perf optimization I just mentioned, but that's not exactly the same thing.
Right.
But
you think that this is adding to a dictionary called metadata, so we're going to call it metadata key. Doesn't sound off of what you would expect for these sort of pipeliner things.
maybe, or like, would it be classification key? But yeah, I'm not sure.
Since
Semantically.
classification is one of the things here, it'd be weird if they were all called classification key.
Yeah, or like metadata classification key. Yeah, but yeah, I think metadata key is probably fine. Or classification metadata key. But yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yep. Did you have something else, Tanner?
No.
Okay.
And this isn't like part of some static interface or anything like that. It's just
Just a pattern,
for
I think.
convenience. Yeah. Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, seems good to me.
So should I move on to the writers?
Yeah, so where do these enrichers go? When do you use them? Is there a pipeliney thing later that we haven't seen yet? Or do you wrap these other
yes,
wrap
yes,
each
yes,
thing?
yes.
Okay, so we just haven't seen where they get consumed yet. All right.
Exactly. The last part of the pipeline, it's ingestion chunk writer. It's something that takes async enumerable of chunks, and it's responsible for persisting them somewhere, and it just returns a task. Since I expect that most of these are going to wrap some idisposable resources, I decided to make the abstract class implement idisposable as well. But I might be biased based on my experience from work on Microsoft Extensions vector data, where we ended up doing this for all abstract classes because half of the connectors actually do have some disposable resources. So the writer is very simple. Then we have sealed option back for the first and only implementation of writer that we provide. It takes a collection name, which is the name of the collection. If you come from DB space, it's basically a name of the DB table, but the vector stores don't use terms table. They have collections. Another one is distance function. these are the map functions that can be used by the vector store. If it's not provided, it's null by default. We use the default for given vector store. And then the last configuration property, incremental ingestion. So we want to support a scenario where somebody, let's say, ingested a description of given protocol today. Tomorrow, this protocol description is extended with 2 more paragraphs. And what we want to allow the users is to kind of ingest an updated version of the same document. And the way it's implemented, we just let the users to say it's incremental ingestion. And what we are going to do, we are going to find all of the chunks that were inserted before we started the ingestion. And after we finish the ingestion, we are going to remove them. So the database is going to contain only the updated versions for given document. And the implementation that we want to provide is called Vector Store Writer, because it's using Vector Store from Microsoft Extensions Vector Data. And we have 2 mandatory arguments, the vector store and dimension count. On top of that, we expose the collection exposed by vector store. So for example, people who ingest some data and we create the collection for them, we choose the schema, all of that, we expose the collection so they can, for example, perform some vector search after the ingestion.
How often do you
So-
expect someone to actually use the default options?
So this particular tool, it's choosing its own schema and it's capable of storing any chunk with any kind of metadata. So I would not expect people to have a pre-existing collections. So I expect that in most cases, people will use the defaults, which will be the option back will be null, because the default distance function is typically the best one selected by given vector store. I expect that what people will be typically doing will be asking for incremental ingestion, but it will be still minority of the users. But these are just my estimations for now.
And you think no one, the average caller doesn't care what the collection name is?
Yes.
Because if the average caller was going to specify it, then I was going to ask, should we move dimension count into the options class and be a mandatory parameter? But if you think that the average caller is going to pass null, then that would be allocating an options just to read the int out of it and throw it away. So, so the mixed bag seems fine.
Yes, but that approach, I think maybe it would make it easier to discover the existence of the option back. So people would like find out about the existence of incremental ingestion, for example, feature. Just saying, you know.
IntelliSense and I assume all competing autocomplete features show you there's an extra parameter here, so they'd see it. I mean, if you do want it more in their face that there's stuff they could set, then yeah, you can make them write new. But I think given modern terse C#, they may simply write, new open paren, like literally NEW open paren 5 close paren, and be done with it, and still not see that there's an incremental ingestion property. So
that's correct.
Because I like passing a new 5. So yeah, again, it was really about if the average caller is already going to be saying new vector store writer options, then we should merge the two.
Not.
But if you expect not, then we shouldn't.
So we are now, yes?
Is this Are all these things in the same assembly?
So the abstraction will be in one assembly, and the option bag and the vector store writer will be in a separate assembly.
So like keyword enricher, classification enricher, and all the base classes are all in one thing, but these things that talk about vector store are a separate assembly. That's only these two types.
Yeah, so basically all of the abstractions, the document types and the chunk type, they are in the abstraction, and some option bags, they're in the abstraction, and the rest will be in the second library.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it did come up last time. It would be helpful to show assembly boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the post-quantum cryptography proposal, because some of these types were in box, some of these types were in the compat package, some of them were only in the compat package, and some were only in box. Basically, every type ended up getting annotated with what assemblies is it going to appear in. That's probably that's not necessarily the right answer, but at least it was showing at every step of the way, like, here's what box this fits into, or in those cases,
I
boxes.
see.
Or just doing it as like, separate chunks in the proposal, or just some way of conveying it in the future.
I see.
Just to think
Yeah,
for everyone
it
to
makes
think
a
about.
lot of sense. Yeah, here the split was simple, as I said. Everything abstract goes to abstractions, and the rest, the implementations, go to a dedicated package.
Right. Well, but you say the abstractions, but I assume that like ingestion pipeline is an abstraction. So.
Yeah. So.
So it's really these two things are one package, and everything else is another. And that's for dependency reasons, I assume.
Yes.
Because this pulls in vector store, this should live with this, and yeah.
Yeah. But for the ingestion pipeline, so maybe let's talk more about this. So in order to create an ingestion pipeline, you have to specify a reader, chunker, and writer, and you can specify the pipeline options, which is currently an option bag with a single property. We expect in the future to let the users to somehow configure the parallelism level of it. And then via the toGetter, which expose iList collections, you can specify document and chunk processors, which are optional. And we have three methods. One that allows for processing given dictionary with given a search pattern and search options, and another one that allows for processing IEnumerable of files. And all of them, it's not an abstraction because it's a concrete implementation, because the implementation is very simple. Like for each file, use a reader, then use the processors, then use the chunker, and do the streaming. Like take a result of a chunker, provide it to multiple chunk processors if you have them, and then whatever they return, give it to the writer. And they are annotated with plenty of diagnostics information. Sorry, I forgot the name. The activity source. So it's. I wasn't sure whether I should introduce an abstraction for the pipeline, but since there is only one implementation and it just takes reader, chunker, writer, and it's like a single thing, and I don't think that there should be a different way of doing this, I have decided to come with a single class that is not an abstract class. The alternative design I was thinking of was to have an abstraction and maybe have like a sequential pipeline and parallel pipeline, but then I was like, if we introduce a parallel pipeline one day, why should anybody be using sequential pipeline? So I would prefer this to be a feature of this class. So everybody's using a single pipeline and it does all of the right things when it comes to metrics and diagnostics. and logging. And because of that, the other parts of the pipeline don't need to think about this. And finally, I think we can take a look at how they would be used. So this sample leverages Azure Document Intelligence, Azure OpenAI, and SQL Server. So we create a reader, we create the LLM, the embedding generator. So far, we have not used our types, maybe except of the reader that derives from the document reader. And now we create semantic simulated chunker in the middle. Then we create the iChat client. We create SQL Server vector store with provided embedding generator. Then we create our own vector store writer. We provide the store, we specify the dimension count, and then we create the pipeline, which is like the reader, chunker, writer, and we configure some optional processors to show how the users can use those APIs. We provide alternative text enricher, summary enricher, and sentiment enricher. And we have a working pipeline, and now the user can do something like await pipeline processing new directory info of a dot, which is current directory, and asterisk PDF, which is going to ingest all of the PDF files from given directory.
Fair enough.
I know the sample looks pretty verbose, but I wanted to show how it would look like in real world scenario. And, you know, I know it's verbose, but on the other hand, we use a bunch of real world, you know, AI related products here, and I think it plays quite nicely.
Indeed. And I feel like this line could actually be down here, and you have, would then have sort of everything above here is existing
right.
types, and then the bottom 5 lines would be pretend it's 5. I can't count. Would be a bigger number, but would be the new
Exactly.
code. Yeah. So returning to the 2 conflicting guidelines that we have from earlier, you made this property be iList, which matches the one guideline and violates the other. But then you made this be dictionary, which flips it. So which way are we feeling? Because it feels like you should be locally consistent.
So let's. I prefer to expose dictionary rather than iDictionary. So let's use the actual implementation. Let's expose the concrete types rather than abstractions.
Yeah. Well, but Stefan, you said that there were cases that you've regretted exposing a property as dictionary, right?
No, because we usually don't. Like generally,
Okay.
where we expose it in public API, we use interfaces. But I say there have been times where we actually changed implementations, having done that, even though it'd technically be breaking if someone did the cast or something. But I don't feel strongly about this. If you guys want to use dictionary and list, I think it's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, we can say the dictionary and the iList are different, and we're following different things for different reasons, but the fact that it was not consistent, it made me ask the question. Because your expectation on this property is really just a thing that people can call add-on, in which case
Yes.
iList does seem to be the right answer. Nobody's going to take this and then start or want to do any of the things that you can do on list that you can't on iList, which I can't think of right now. But because like list you can do the get backing span of, and iList you can't. But
No, that's true.
But no one should care, right? And
yes.
Aside from devirtualizing calls, why do you think it's important to expose concrete dictionary? Because I assume these dictionaries actually aren't going to have all that much in them.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, I don't see a reason why I should be using anything else than a dictionary internally. Like, and since people can call it quite often, I was like, yeah, just maybe reduce the perf overhead for the hypothetical chance of using an abstraction in the future.
I guess, but this is like talking about virtual function dispatch costs with cryptography. The virtual dispatch is zero cost compared to the other work you're doing here.
Yes, absolutely.
Like yes, technically you can make the benchmark smaller. It doesn't matter. You're gonna be like 4 CPU cycles faster on a thing that takes like a day. So
That's correct.
but yeah,
it's my private obsession that I took from previous projects,
So-
where I was happy to work on performance.
yeah. Looking at what is written in the book, the require the weakest thing you need and return the strongest thing you have only actually gets talked about in it's a quote block from Anthony Moore. That is definitely a thing we do talk about, but what we have written as the do, or rather do not, is do not expose dictionary. I don't know that we consistently follow that guideline, but it was in Tanner's head for some reason, and that is what it says. So I think the most guideline consistent thing would be to slap an I in front of the chunk metadata and say it returns iDictionary.
I'm okay with that. I don't have a very strong opinion on this.
And then who's actually going to read that metadata? Because looking at your flow here, does it get written by the vector store writer as part of the vector
So
stored
the chunk-
stuff?
Yes, exactly. The chunk processors produce metadata, and the writer is actually consuming it and writing.
Okay. Just because once the final flow was you throw this in a pipeline and you never see any of these things, it then felt a little weird. But if it's ending up in the database in the end, that makes sense. Alright, so I think we changed them all to nullable. Alright, so the change summary that I have is we replaced all of the default values that had, or all of the default parameters that had semantic values to be nullable. And at a cursory glance, I don't see any that I missed. Token count, we made mandatory. I'll use the past tense. But said you can also just delete it. We merged tokenizer into the chunker options. We added read-only span of string overloads to string accepting constructors, and we decided to go with iDictionary for ingestion chunk metadata.
Yes. Could you scroll down to the chunkers? Because I think the options should not be nullable now, because the users have to provide the...
Good call.
And by the way, with this option back, it always amazes me how with this API review board, like how far I was forever from very simple solution that turns out to be obvious when you talk with a few people about it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the people or just the rubber ducking. Like, my wife's an author, and it's amazing the number of things that she has found wrong in her books when just reading it out loud. It's like your brain totally skipped over this problem when you were just reading it inside your head, but stopping and saying it out loud is like, maybe that wasn't the best way to write that. Or, hey, I missed like 6 words in that sentence. Oh. All right. Anybody else have feedback on this one? Going once. Twice. Yes, it was already discussed. The caller can modify the metadata dictionary. It's in fact expected as part of the pipelining. Sold.
Awesome.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, big thanks for your help and of sharing all of the expertise and being so kind to my silly mistakes.
No worries. All right. Next up, I have .NET Extension 64906, Kubernetes Specialized Resource Monitoring.
Yes, so it's from me, and it has been brought to the API review, I think like 2 months ago, I think probably. And back then the proposal was a bit different, and it was suggested to decouple Kubernetes specific classes from the core class of the resource monitoring. But maybe just to bring a bit more context to it and remind what was it about, it's that resource monitoring right now has no ways, especially for Windows, has no ways to know what are the request quotas in Kubernetes environment. And it would be something that would be helpful to have some telemetry over. And basically this package brings that possibility, or these additions rather, because it's more than just one package, brings that possibility. So then we can measure also the CPU and memory utilization against requests. And idea here is to we have the diagnostics resource monitoring package, and it's the core package that we have right now. It has quite small API surface right now, and we would try and prefer to leave it this way. And in order to bring those features for the Kubernetes, we are adding, or we're proposing here, bringing the abstractions package, additional one to the core one, that would have few abstractions necessary, and it would contain the iResource quota provider interface that would produce resource quota object, and this would be basically the data containing the limits and the requests for memory and CPU. So basically the divider for the calculations, I would say. So this is the abstraction for it, which would be separated from the core package. And then we can bring also the new package would be the Kubernetes one, and it would implement the iResource quota provider, but it would bring the data for the Kubernetes. So in this particular case, it would read the environment variables, or actually the environment variables that would be configured by the developer, so they can select how to find them. And the main way would be to use prefix, because that's usually how it's done in Kubernetes, that once you expose those environment variables down from the pod, you could specify a prefix there, so it would add this prefix to the value and expose all of that as environment variables. So here in the API, the proposal is to just have this prefix added, if there is any, and then it will just bring the default names to the prefix. And yeah, that's kind of all. And it would be all about contained in one method, which would be add Kubernetes resource monitoring. And it would do all of the registration needed to make it work right away. And it would result of being able to emit 2 additional metrics in the core library. That would be the container CPU request utilizations and container memory request utilization. Right now we do not have those, but we would bring them, and those would be emitted always, but normally they would emit the same what's under the limits. But if you bring some other resource quotas in this particular Kubernetes, then they would reflect that data there as well. What else? We decided to bring the abstractions package here because we can add a few more providers, maybe as Service Fabric, or even decouple a bit the logic that is already in the core package. It's all under internals. So we could try to move a few things from there to the abstractions package to maybe split the calculations for the container scenarios and non-container scenarios, but that's possibility.
Okay, so your usage shows calling the extension method and specifying a prefix. Do you expect everyone to generally have a prefix, or is the default actually sensible of the empty string?
Yeah, the default would work with the default behavior of this downward API that produces those environment variables.
Okay, so this one could have passed the empty string and would get the same behavior.
Yes, if the downward API is configured this way, like basically, the developer needs to be aware of what is configuring here against what's in the downward API in Kubernetes.
Okay. But the empty string is going to be a common enough value that you want it to be a default.
Yes.
Okay.
Why is it's not none?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it should be now.
Yeah, and is every caller who passes a non-null/non-empty value expected to end it with an underscore? And if so, should the platform take care of that, or do you really want the callers to have to specify the underscore?
Yeah, from configuration point of view, I mean, like, let the user specify the exact prefix, including the underscore. Otherwise, I mean, like, you can run into some weird issues.
Yeah, and it's optional. You don't have to put the underscore to the download API, so it's up to the developer what will be there. So it would be probably in most cases not correct to assume to just add it there, because it may just result into something different.
Okay.
So we expect just one provider get registered to the container at a time, or
Yes, it will be only one. So normally that would be the default implementation of this interface would be registered in the at-resource monitoring method, which is in the core package. So that would register the default one. And those rely on the current APIs that we use to get this data from. Like for the Windows, it would be group jobs, and for the Linux, it would be cgroups or cgroups v2. And yeah, here we just use this, and this will just bring the provider for the Kubernetes.
This extension method appears to exist in no class at all. That doesn't seem right.
Yes. Let me see. I have PR for it there. I'll quickly check it. But most likely it will be in the. Yeah, actually, I'll check it. It'll be easier. So yeah, the namespace is correct. It's just dependency injection, and then the class is the static class that is Kubernetes resource quota service collections extensions.
Kubernetes quota.
Kubernetes resource quota service collections extensions.
Collection
Just
singular or plural?
copy and paste it in the chat?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Then I need to remember where chat lives. All right. So, yes. The general guideline, of course, is to not or pretend that extensions aren't extensions and therefore not make a type called extensions to hold them. That is certainly not how DI is done, so that's fine. But I feel like this S on the end of collection is not expected. Because the type is service collection.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
That to be typo. Yeah. Check the
Right.
other ones.
No, don't do that. Right. So you have these four limits. Sorry, these four numbers. How do you expect this to grow if other sorts of bounded operations get defined in the future? Or what if some particular resource provider has some extra type of thing that can be quoted, like, you know, requests per minute? What's your expectation of how this model evolves or gets customized?
So most likely, if this class would grow with the additional properties, then we would have to bring new interface for the calculations that would utilize those new properties to the core package.
Meaning the core package already assumes 4 things?
Yes.
But this is a new type.
Yes. Right now, this data is calculated just not using this class. Like it's basically variables in the class for that's doing the calculations.
Okay, so if something was like it hosted as an Azure service provider and they have a token limit, which I know is a different thing that we've done. This can't talk about their token consumption versus their token rate quota. So it's a custom provider can't, because this type's not sealed, so they could extend it and add more data, but you're saying that the pipeline that you have just will ignore the extra data.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, having it sealed makes sense in most cases. Like we could, like as I suggested, we could then bring the interfaces for the calculations to where the actual formulas would be formulated and used to calculate whatever would be there. But it's, I would say, probably unlikely to happen.
Should we seal this class for now? Because like this is the only 4 things that the pipelines will care about.
No, yes to me.
Yeah, sealing it just to indicate that your system can't handle extensibility for now seems reasonable. So on the one hand, I appreciate that putting, limit and request first means they group together in IntelliSense. On the other hand, as chat has pointed out, limits memory sounds like a Boolean. And we could get rid of the S, then it says limit memory, but then that also sounds like a Boolean. So I think this wants to be something like memory limit in bytes. Because what's the unit was another question somebody had. So I think we want to, because properties should basically be English phrases, and requests memory is a Boolean, and memory requests is a noun phrase. So
yeah, that's a good point. I brought it like right away from the how it's defined in the Kubernetes like YAML files, right? Because it's like object, which is requests, and then it has memory and CPU. So from this point of view, it kind of makes sense if you know the context, but here, if you do not, then yeah, it's
I guess
maybe
actually
confusing. Yeah.
what is the requests memory limit? Like, what does it even mean?
We do not have this. Like we have limits memory or limits CPU.
Yeah, but then you have requests memory, and I don't.
Yes.
Is this so again, going back to the unit, is this in bytes? Is this a number of times you're allowed to call malloc? Is this?
Yeah, it's in bytes. It's like how much your container or pod is allowed to consume memory, like as a minimum, because a limit is like a hard limit that the Kubernetes won't allow you to consume more of the CPU. But with the requests, it's like the number that states that your node will have sufficient memory to accommodate your request.
So this is So again, ignore Kubernetes.
Yeah, okay.
What do these mean? Is this maximum and this is minimum? Is this hard max and this is soft max?
Mm,
Because this needs to work
yes.
for C groups and Kubernetes and everything else. So you need to describe what these actually are, not describe what Kubernetes calls them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I actually don't know what they are, so I can't give you a suggested name.
Mm. Yeah, going over like as suggested, like hard limit or soft limit would make sense. But
Is
it doesn't.
is it limits memory? Is it also apply for the requests only, or it's in general about like the container cannot use more than that?
Like it's like if you get to this limit, the like you will get throttled. Like the app will get throttled to consume more.
And this happen when the request is requested.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand about like, because like the other one, which is you said request memory, request CPU has the word request. So this apply only when the request is happening. But if the container is doing something other than like doing some, I don't know about like any activities that it's not per request, does this mean that this the limit memory at that time? I'm trying to differentiate between what you mean by requests and the ones that doesn't have requests.
So the requests is the we could describe it as minimal amount of memory or the CPU the app should have to work properly.
Right. So is it a guaranteed minimum amount of memory?
Yes.
Is your process guaranteed to already be allocated that memory? Or is it just a promise that it's promising it can adhere to?
Now with the requests, it like has to be fulfilled. It won't be like working. It won't be scheduled if it's if there's not enough memory available on the node.
Yes, chat just said request is how much memory needs to be free for a pod to be scheduled on a node. And
Yeah.
limit is the max. So that seems like requests is target. Or like I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're rejecting this because you can't name these things, but
Yeah.
Or we're sending it back as these names need work.
Yeah.
The other, I guess, clarification. You want to add a new package just for these two types?
Yes.
Why not put them in the existing resource monitoring package?
Yeah, just to provide in the future room to bring another abstractions there that I've mentioned.
Right, but right with the class sizes this small, the cost of having a package is like 10 times bigger than the cost of having these classes. Like every new assembly adds an expense. Every new NuGet package adds an expense. This is like 900% overhead. So unless you're planning on growing this by at least 10 times and still think it's worth, quote unquote, not polluting your other package, I think these should just go in the other package. Not the Kubernetes package. That one's different because it has functionality differences, it has dependency differences, but these are just a thing can tell me quota limits. Okay, that's just part of core resource monitoring offering.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Yeah, that makes sense.
think
Yeah,
a new
like,
package
yeah,
is
even if it
justified.
would grow, we would talk about like few more classes. Like it would not grow probably to any like 10 times, like you said. Probably it
And
will
I
not
mean,
happen even if we like bring everything there.
that's a number off the top of my head, but you know, every NuGet package means that now Dependabot needs to look, does it have a new version? Restore is going to take so slightly longer. The in terms of bytes, these classes, like this interface is, I don't know, that's what, 100 bytes of IL, and the assembly is like a K. So just to be an assembly. So uh so yeah, I don't think that the resource quota and resource quota provider, I think, should go in the existing package.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
So Jeremy, you are okay to use interface here?
I mean, it's kind of the DI way. I always prefer classes over interfaces.
Yeah, DI still work with abstract classes.
It does. So yes, I guess the question is, so you said interface, do you genuinely believe that you will never add a second method to this interface? Or alternatively, what would be wrong with it being a abstract class? Does every resource quota provider need to also derive some other type?
No, it's like just standalone, I would say. Yeah, let's say object. And I think it as it is now, I don't see it growing really in the future.
Yeah, well, the trouble with I don't see it growing is that's usually when it wants to grow. So, uh, so yes, I either agree with Tarek or have the position that Tarek implied that I should have, which is I recommend that it be a just public abstract class resource quota provider, public abstract resource quota, get resource quota.
And what? Yeah, because it sounds good.
It just means that you have the ability to add to it in the future.
So we could not add more methods to this interface going forward if
I assume you care about Net Standard 2.0 and .NET Framework.
Yes.
then you can never add a member to an interface.
Okay.
The
When we've
guideline
had to
suggested
do
in the
stuff.
book is if it does not end in the word able, it shouldn't be an interface.
Yeah. In the past, when we've had to do stuff like that, you end up having multiple interfaces. Then you have to do like ASCAST and stuff, which can make sense if it really is an interface. But if it's not, I think it makes sense for it to be an abstract based class.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So, yes, change this to an abstract class. We put a type around this. Change this name and change this from empty to default, and then we're sending this back as these names need improvement. In particular, nobody seems to be able to describe this one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yes, once the resource quota names can be described generically to work for all of the resource providers that we know about, plus any future ones that we can envision, then we can talk about it again.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds good.
And boop.
So we will keep the same names in the resource quota. I mean, because like.
Well, no, we're
it's
giving it needs work because they need new names.
okay.
We're just giving up on coming up with new names during the session.
I would say to use something like max allowed memory, max allowed CPU.
Yes, but we don't know what this one means. So knowing what this one is may affect what we recommend the name of this one to be.
Okay.
That's really the concern I have. Otherwise, it would be, yes, memory limit in bytes would be the fix for limits memory.
Yeah, it also misses the invites. I think it also will help to like tell what it is actually. Like as you said previously, it could be considered as a Boolean. So
yeah.
Well,
So yeah, that middle bullet is resource quota properties need better names.
Yeah, good.
All right. I mean, other than now we're down to 4 nouns or noun phrases, and but this looks like a nice minimal touch point, and that it will work for more providers than just Kubernetes. So it's definitely getting close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're down to 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to be quick about it.
Okay.
Yes. So this proposal is about the dependency metadata resolver class. It's practically a service that looks at an outgoing HTTP request, specifically at its host path and method, and returns a piece of metadata describing which downstream dependency and operation it actually represents. So you register one or more dependency metadata providers, and each of them has to list host suffixes and route templates. Then this resolver builds lookup once, and then every request can be classified quickly without any other custom code. Application then uses this classification to tag logs, metrics, traces, or select resilience policies based on this dependency name, instead of just using a raw URLs. And because it's an abstract class, you can plug in like different alternative strategies, like different mention rules, dynamic data, etc., etc., etc. While most users will just inject the default resolver and call the get request metadata to get consistent names. So we already have this class in the .NET extensions. It's actually called the Downstream Dependency Metadata Manager. It is the implementation itself is try-based solution, but it's not really extensible and it's not really flexible. So this one is actually exposes it, but it just gives it a different name and more options to configure it. So expose the abstract class in the API. Not the API, just the extension methods for it. So yeah, this one is about it. There's obviously the alternative design for the interface, but for most of the customers, default implementation would work just fine. So we don't want to force everyone to just rewrite it because we have an interface now. And I have a conditional compilation here because we have to support both .NET Framework and the newest versions. And for .NET Framework, we're going to use the overload that takes HTTP web request message. And for all other cases, we're going to use HTTP request message.
So I assume this lives in a net standard 2 package. Clearly multi-targeted because
Yes.
you're using pound diff. So the problem is the net 462 doesn't implement the interface.
Oh yeah. Then in that case, I think it should be actually if net, just a net, and I think it should be like that. I think that we have it like that in the .NET extensions.
Okay, so you mean if net 462 include HTTP web request and always include HTTP request message?
I mean, by changing the condition to the if net, so it's going to include both .NET Standard and net 462. And I think both of them have the HTTP web request.
Well, if net is just .NET Core.
What was the syntax for it? Is net core?
So
I mean,
What-
looking at the existing one, there is no if def.
yeah, which methods do you expect to be present on which frameworks?
Yeah, so for .NET Core and everything above the .NET 462 starting with .NET 5, it's gonna be the HTTP. It's gonna take the HTTP request message. For next 462 and for the .NET Standard, it's gonna take the HTTP web request.
So the existing iDownstream dependency metadata manager is that like conditionally
No, it
included
has-
in the project? It has both, right?
It has both. Yeah, it has both. But I'm just thinking
Without
that
an if def?
no, without an if. I mean, technically, I don't quite remember. It might have the if inside, but it actually implements both of
doesn't.
them.
Right. So why yeah. Do we need the if def?
Yeah, it seems like just make both of them always available.
I've been thinking about that one, but I've been thinking that it's actually gonna make the API surface a bit unclear because let's say if I am a customer, I need to decide which one do I actually need, because if you have a conditional compilation, right, you're always gonna end up with a single method for you.
But the
Well,
trouble is
So
if you're building a net standard consuming model, you won't see the one that's conditionally compiled, which means that you're missing it on the framework that it applies to.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly here, I mean, we don't support .NET Framework before 462 anyway to now. So if you are saying that in 462 and up, including NetCore, it will be the one who has web requests. So this looks like this is the only method we need to have here
You don't
because we
want,
don't support it before 462.
You don't want web request on modern.NET because it's considered obsolete.
Okay.
so
But-
can we
but
get
you-
rid of it?
But you
Oh,
but
okay, so
on
it
down
should
level,
be-
if you define it for down level, you still need it on modern.NET so that it's not a binary break. Removing an API between framework and modern.NET, we tend to not do because of the binary break.
So HTTP request message, this is defined on NetCore only?
No, request message is available down to .NET 4.5 as well.
Okay,
So can we
why-
only support that? Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but sorry. But yeah.
No,
That's
no,
where
go
you're
ahead. Yeah, I if the second one is supported already in 4.5.2 and up, including NetCore, which has HTTP request message, so this is the only method we need here.
True, but I wasn't sure that it's actually supported in 4.5. But if you say so, I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
because if you say that the net 462, I guess it's a virtual, so it would be fine. If it was abstract in the if net 462, then a net standard 2 package loaded in framework would explode for not overwriting the other member. But conversely, you get the same problem. If I defined a net standard 2 package, I only see that that there's a one taking an HTTP request message. Anybody who's routing via HTTP web request would then get the default behavior, not my behavior, and I would have no way of fixing that. So I don't think we want any conditional compilation API here. You either want both
Okay.
always, or you want to not support HWR.
Yeah, so the way it is now is that we have both of them, and yeah, if you're fine keeping both of them, I would actually like to keep both of them.
Do we know why we need the HTTP web request one? Like, I'm trying to search where it's called. I don't have the repo cloned immediately, but I'm doing like the GitHub dot thing.
Yeah, so HTTP diagnostic package, it supports the .NET Core, Net Standard 2.0, and the .NET 462. So I think that it was, I mean, the original methods, the downstream dependency, dependency manager, I think it was written like years ago, and back then, I think it made sense to support both of them.
So does like, do we have to carry that decision forward, or like, is that already vestigial?
That's a good question.
I guess, yeah. Does anyone ever need to customize the behavior for HTTP web request, or because it's obsolete, do we not care? That's not the same as saying, should the existing one rip it out?
So for the new ones, I think that it will ever be used. But for the existing ones, okay, so I'm not actually sure that we need to carry it over. So I'm say, yeah. So let's say we just keep the HTTP request message one, and and if you find that we still need to support the old one, I'm just gonna bring it up again on the API review.
Okay.
Do we know what version we added the obsolete attribute to web request create? It's not in 4.6.2. I guess it's obsolete in the package version that you can get for 4.6.2, but not the inbox version.
Is a package version of HTTP web request?
Says there's a package provided one on the docs. Yes.
Because I would assume that's a package provided one for compat for core.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's for compat for core, but the versioning there and the way. So if you were on net standard, then you would, if you're on net standard 2.0, for example, you get web request create without the obsolete attribute.
Yeah.
We recommend everyone switches over to HTTP client, but there's likely some code bases that are still on .NET Framework, for example, 4.6.2, that haven't made the switch, and we've not obsoleted it on 4.6.2. So they may expect that if they're already using web request, even if not recommended, that they can continue using it. So that would be the reason to also expose it for anyone in that scenario.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question then would be, is it important that they get processed through the system?
Yeah.
And
This new system, and I'm not even sure this gets called in the internal system right now. I'm looking for where it's used with HTTP web requests, and I'm not sure it is.
yeah, so I'm suggesting that maybe it's fine that anybody who's still using web request create, not that their requests, if they even get processed by the current system, that we don't support customizing the processing of those messages. If they're like, hey, why didn't this work? Then it's like, well, switch to HTTP client.
Okay, so do we agree on that we just leave the overload with the HTTP request message?
I think so. And again, if you find you need the other one, it should be an easy addition. Generally, I recommend against public virtual and instead use the template method pattern. But I assume the only thing that you could do as a common argument validation here is that it's not null, at which point, fine. Let everybody override it and do their own null check. I mean, if you want to use the template method pattern, I won't stop you. I just have less of a reason to recommend it here.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll think about it.
All right. So I think that means we've narrowed it down to that. Any other comments? Sold. Right at the
Okay,
deadline.
yeah, great. Yeah, I told you I'll be quick. Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being quick. All right. That means that once again, we did not get to figuring out how we feel about breaking F# from the system rune API overloads. So hopefully we'll get to that one next week.
We should allocate some time for it specifically. I mean, maybe we can start next time with it. Or
the trouble
if there
is
is no any .NET 10, yeah.
is 10.0 is a, like, we added that in 11 and these things are all marked as 10, so they all have higher priority. It's the top priority for 11. So
yeah,
as long as no new 10 or blocking issues get open this week, it'll be first up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to delay you again, but thanks for joining us.
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Sorry for being out last week. We should be back on a regular schedule, so hopefully see you all next week at our same .NET time here on our same .NET channel. Until then, au revoir.